March 3, 1974. A young woman walks across a college campus in broad daylight. Witnesses see her struggling with crutches, dropping books. A man approaches to help. She smiles, says thank you, and gets into his Volkswagen Beetle. She was never seen alive again. Her name was one of at least 30. His name was Ted Bundy, and he was just one of the monsters we're about to examine. Throughout history, certain individuals have committed acts so horrific, so methodical, and so incomprehensible that they've forever changed how we understand human evil. These aren't fictional characters from horror movies. These are real people who walked among us, hiding in plain sight, living double lives that fooled neighbors, co-workers, even families. What you're about to hear are documented cases that shocked investigators, paralyzed communities, and left scars that remain to this day. This is True Crime Vault, where we unlock the cases that deserve to be remembered, not to glorify these individuals, but to understand how they evaded justice for so long, how they were finally caught, and how their victims are honored. These stories are disturbing, they're factual, and they're real. Before we begin this investigation, make sure to subscribe and hit that notification bell. Here at True Crime Vault, we bring you in-depth documentaries on the cases that changed criminal investigation forever. New content every week. And if you're ready to dive into some of the darkest chapters in criminal history, hit that like button now. Let's start with the name that became synonymous with the term serial killer itself. Ted Bundy appeared to be the perfect young man. Law student, volunteer at a crisis hotline. Handsome, charming, articulate. People trusted him. Women felt safe around him. And that was exactly what made him so dangerous. Between 1974 and 1978, Bundy confessed to 30 homicides, though investigators believe the actual number could be much higher. His victims were young women, often college students, with long dark hair parted down the middle. His method was calculated and cruel. He would fake an injury, wear a cast, or use crutches to appear vulnerable and non-threatening. He'd ask for help carrying books or loading something into his car. Once the victim was close enough, alone enough, the mask would drop. What followed were abductions, assaults, and murders that demonstrated a level of cruelty that still haunts investigators today. Bundy's intelligence made him particularly dangerous. He studied psychology and law. He understood how police investigations worked. He knew how to avoid leaving evidence. He moved between states, understanding that communication between jurisdictions in the 70s was limited. He was always one step ahead, until he wasn't. His first known victim was Linda Ann Healy, who disappeared from her basement bedroom in Seattle on February 1, 1974. Her bed was made. There were blood stains on the pillow and nightgown. She simply vanished. Throughout that year, young women continued to disappear across Washington state. The police had no leads, no bodies, no evidence, just missing person reports that kept piling up. Then came July 14, 1974, at Lake Sammamish State Park. Multiple witnesses reported seeing a man with his arm in a sling asking women for help loading a sailboat onto his car. He introduced himself as Ted. Two women, Janice Ott and Denise Naslund, were never seen alive again. Their remains were found months later. This was the first major break in the case. Composite sketches were created. Tips flooded in. One of those tips came from Bundy's own girlfriend, Elizabeth Klipfer, though police didn't follow up seriously at the time. Bundy moved to Utah in fall 1974 to attend law school. The disappearances in Washington stopped. New ones began in Utah and Colorado. The pattern was undeniable to investigators looking back, but in real time, connecting these dots across state lines was nearly impossible. His luck ran out on August 16, 1975. A Utah Highway Patrol officer noticed a Volkswagen Beetle driving suspiciously through a residential neighborhood at 2:30 a.m. When the officer tried to pull the car over, it sped away before finally stopping. Inside the vehicle, Officer Bob Hayward found handcuffs, an ice pick, a crowbar, a ski mask, and rope. Bundy claimed they were just tools. He was arrested for evading police. This routine traffic stop would unravel everything. A search of his apartment revealed Colorado ski brochures and gas receipts that placed him in areas where women had vanished. His Volkswagen matched witness descriptions from multiple abduction sites. Most damning, one of his intended victims had escaped. Carol Durant had been approached by a man claiming to be a police officer in November 1974. He tried to handcuff her and force her into his car. She fought back, jumped out, and survived. She identified Bundy in a lineup. He was convicted of kidnapping Deranche and sentenced to 15 years. But investigators in Colorado wanted him for murder. While awaiting trial in Aspen, Bundy escaped from the courthouse law library by jumping from a second-story window. He was recaptured 8 days later in the mountains. But this wasn't his last escape. On December 30th, 1977, Bundy escaped again, this time from Glenwood Springs Jail. He'd lost weight deliberately, squeezed through a crawl space in the ceiling, and disappeared into the night. This time, he made it much farther. He traveled to Tallahassee, Florida, using stolen credit cards and fake identities. He was free, and he was about to commit some of his most horrific crimes. In the early morning hours of January 15, 1978, Bundy entered the Chi Omega sorority house at Florida State University through a door with a faulty lock. What happened in the next 15 minutes would leave 2 young women dead and 2 others severely injured. Margaret Bowman and Lisa Levy were murdered in their beds. Survivors reported hearing strange thumping sounds but thought nothing of it until the horror was discovered. The brutality of the attack shocked even seasoned homicide detectives. Bundy had left bite marks on Lisa Levy's body. In 1978, bite mark evidence was relatively new in forensic investigation, but it would prove crucial. After his arrest, dental impressions were taken. They matched the bite marks perfectly. This physical evidence, combined with witness testimony placing him near the sorority house, would seal his fate. His final victim was 12-year-old Kimberly Leach, abducted from her school in Lake City, Florida, on February 9, 1978. Her remains were found 8 weeks later. Bundy was arrested on February 15th after a police officer ran the plates on his stolen vehicle during a routine stop. At first, he gave a fake name, but his real identity was soon confirmed. The trials that followed were media circuses. Bundy represented himself at times, cross-examining witnesses, making arguments, playing to cameras. He married Carol Ann Boone during his murder trial, and she later gave birth to his daughter. He maintained his innocence for years, giving interviews, writing letters, becoming a twisted celebrity. People wanted to understand him. He wanted the attention. Only when his execution date approached did Bundy begin confessing. In the days before his death, he admitted to 30 murders, providing details only the killer would know. He drew maps to dump sites. He described victims by name. Investigators believe he was responsible for many more, but he took those secrets to his grave. On January 24, 1989, Ted Bundy was executed in Florida's electric chair. Outside the prison, crowds celebrated. Victims' families watched. It was over, but the impact of his crimes continues. He changed how we think about serial killers, how we profile them, how we investigate them. He proved that evil doesn't always look like a monster. Sometimes it looks like the helpful young man offering to carry your books. Now, what do you think about Bundy's ability to evade capture for so long? Was it his intelligence, or were investigative systems simply unprepared for someone like him? Drop your theory in the comments below. But Bundy was far from the only serial killer who shocked the world. Let's travel to Milwaukee, Wisconsin, where one of the most disturbing cases in American history unfolded behind the doors of apartment 213. Jeffrey Dahmer seemed unremarkable to his neighbors. Quiet, kept to himself, worked at a chocolate factory. Some noticed strange smells coming from his apartment, but he explained them away. Some heard odd noises late at night, but in a city, strange sounds are common. No one suspected that inside his apartment, horrors beyond imagination were taking place. On July 22, 1991, a man named Tracy Edwards flagged down police officers on a Milwaukee street. He was handcuffed, terrified, and told an incredible story. A man had tried to kill him. He'd barely escaped from an apartment where his captor had threatened him with a knife. He led police back to the Oxford Apartments, to Unit 213. The officers knocked on the door. Jeffrey Dahmer answered. He seemed calm, cooperative. He explained the handcuffs were just part of an argument. But Officer Rolf Mueller noticed something. A strange smell. Photos of dismembered bodies on the walls. He moved toward the bedroom to investigate further. Dahmer tried to stop him. That resistance gave officers probable cause to search. What they found defies comprehension. In the refrigerator, a human head. In the freezer, more body parts wrapped carefully. In a filing cabinet, preserved skulls. Photographs documenting every stage of his murders. Preserved organs in jars. A barrel of acid with decomposing remains. The apartment wasn't just a crime scene, it was a horror museum. Dahmer didn't run, didn't resist. When confronted with the evidence, he simply said, "For what I did, I should be dead." He confessed to 17 murders between 1978 and 1991. His first victim was Stephen Hicks, a hitchhiker he picked up in 1978 when Dahmer was just 18. He'd taken Hicks to his parents' house while they were away, killed him with a barbell, and dismembered the body. Then he waited 9 years before killing again. His methods were systematic. He'd meet men at gay bars, bus stations, or shopping malls. He'd offer money for photos or to come back to his apartment for drinks. Once there, he'd drug them. When they were unconscious, he'd strangle them. What came after is almost too disturbing to detail, but it's documented in police reports and his own confessions. He engaged in necrophilia. He performed amateur lobotomies on some victims while they were still alive, attempting to create compliant, zombie-like companions. He dismembered bodies in his bathtub, photographing every step. He kept body parts as trophies. How did he evade capture for so long? There were warning signs everywhere. In 1988, he was arrested for drugging and molesting a 13-year-old boy, the younger brother of one of his future victims. He served 10 months of a 1-year sentence. In May 1991, a 14-year-old Laotian boy named Konarak Synthesomphone managed to escape from Dahmer's apartment. He was naked, drugged, incoherent, bleeding. 3 women called 911. Police arrived. Dahmer convinced the officers that Synthesomphone was his 19-year-old boyfriend, that they'd just had a fight, that everything was fine. Despite the boy's obvious distress, despite the witnesses pleading with police to help him, officers returned Synthesomphone to Dahmer's apartment. They never checked IDs, never ran Dahmer's name, which would have shown he was a registered sex offender on probation. Within hours of police leaving, Dahmer murdered Konarak Synthesomphone. He killed 4 more men before Tracy Edwards escaped and finally brought him to justice. The trial was straightforward. Dahmer's defense was insanity. His attorneys argued no sane person could commit such acts. But the jury disagreed. They found him sane and guilty on 15 counts of murder. He was sentenced to 15 consecutive life terms, a total of 957 years in prison. On November 28, 1994, while cleaning a prison bathroom, Dahmer was attacked by a fellow inmate named Christopher Scarver. Scarver beat him to death with a metal bar. Dahmer was pronounced dead on the way to the hospital. He was 34 years old. His death brought relief to victims' families, though it could never undo the unimaginable pain he'd caused. The Dahmer case exposed massive failures in the criminal justice system. How did a registered sex offender on probation get away with murder after murder? How were the warnings ignored? How was Konarak Synthesomphone returned to his killer? These questions led to reforms in how police handle domestic disturbances, how they verify identities, how they take witness testimony seriously. But for the families of 17 young men, those reforms came too late. These 2 cases, Bundy and Dahmer, represent different faces of serial murder. Bundy was charming, mobile, methodical. Dahmer was isolated, compulsive, deteriorating. But both illuminate the darkest capabilities of human beings. And unfortunately, they're far from alone in history. Have you heard of these cases before? What shocks you most about how long they remained undetected? Let me know in the comments. Let's shift our focus across the Atlantic to England, where between 1975 and 1981, a man terrorized the north of England and became known as the Yorkshire Ripper. Peter Sutcliffe was a truck driver, married, seemingly ordinary. But between October 1975 and November 1980, he murdered 13 women and attempted to kill 7 others. His method was brutal and consistent, attacking women from behind with a hammer, then using a knife to mutilate their bodies. The terror he created paralyzed entire communities. Women were afraid to go out at night. Police resources were stretched to breaking point. The investigation became the largest manhunt in British history at that time. His first murder victim was Wilma McCann, a 28-year-old mother of 4, killed on October 30, 1975. She was struck twice with a hammer and stabbed 15 times. Her body was found on a playing field in Leeds. 3 months later, Emily Jackson, a 42-year-old mother, was killed in almost identical fashion. The pattern was established, but police didn't yet know they had a serial killer. The attacks continued throughout 1977 and 1978. What made this investigation particularly difficult was the class bias that infected it early on. Many of Sutcliffe's early victims were sex workers. and some in law enforcement and media referred to them as prostitutes in ways that implied they were somehow less worthy of protection or justice. This meant warnings weren't taken seriously enough by some women who didn't fit that profile. It also meant investigative resources weren't allocated as urgently as they should have been. In June 1979, a hoax tape was sent to police by a man claiming to be the killer. The voice had a distinctive Wareside accent. Police became convinced this was their man and poured resources into chasing this lead. They called him Wareside Jack. There was just one problem. The tape was a fake, sent by a disturbed individual named John Humble, who had nothing to do with the murders. This hoax sent the investigation down a dead end for months while Sutcliffe continued killing. Meanwhile, Sutcliffe was interviewed by police 9 times during the investigation. 9 times he was questioned and released. He fit witness descriptions. His car had been spotted in red light districts, but each time he had explanations. He was calm, polite, cooperative, and because police were focused on finding someone with a Wareside accent, Sutcliffe, who had a Yorkshire accent, was ruled out. His final murder victim was Jacqueline Hill, a 20-year-old student at Leeds University, killed on November 17, 1980. Her death was a turning point. She was a student, not a sex worker, and the public outcry intensified. The pressure on police reached a breaking point. They had to catch this killer. On January 2, 1981, police officers in Sheffield stopped a car with false license plates. The driver was Peter Sutcliffe. He had a woman with him who was a sex worker. Officers arrested him for the false plates, but something felt off to them. They searched the area where they'd stopped him and found a hammer and knife hidden nearby. When Sutcliffe was questioned, he began to confess. He admitted to the murders in methodical detail, explaining how he believed he was on a mission from God to kill sex workers. At trial, Sutcliffe pleaded guilty to manslaughter on the grounds of diminished responsibility, claiming paranoid schizophrenia. The prosecution rejected this and insisted on a murder trial. The jury found him guilty of 13 counts of murder. He was sentenced to life imprisonment with a recommendation he serve at least 30 years. That was later upgraded to a whole life order, meaning he would never be released. Peter Sutcliffe died in prison on November 13, 2020, at age 74, from complications related to COVID-19. He never showed genuine remorse. He maintained his delusions about divine missions. The families of his victims had waited decades for justice, and many felt his death behind bars was the only justice possible. The Yorkshire Ripper case remains a study in investigative failures, the hoax tape, the class bias, the repeated interviews that led nowhere. But it also led to major reforms in British policing, including better coordination between departments, advances in psychological profiling, and more serious treatment of crimes against sex workers as crimes against human beings deserving full investigative efforts. What strikes you most about cases where killers are interviewed multiple times before being caught? Is it luck that saves them, or are there systemic failures we still need to address? Share your thoughts below. Now let's examine a case that's even older, but no less chilling. One that remains officially unsolved to this day and has spawned countless theories, books, films, and debates. This is the case of Jack the Ripper. In the autumn of 1888, the Whitechapel district of London was one of the poorest, most overcrowded areas in the city. Poverty, crime, and desperation were everywhere. And in this environment, someone began killing women in ways so brutal that the crimes shocked Victorian society to its core. Between August and November 1888, at least 5 women were murdered and mutilated in Whitechapel. The victims, now known as the Canonical Five, were Mary Ann Nichols, Annie Chapman, Elizabeth Stride, Catherine Eddowes, and Mary Jane Kelly. All were impoverished women, most engaged in sex work to survive. Their deaths were horrific, involving throat cutting and, in most cases, extensive abdominal mutilation with signs of surgical knowledge. The killer was never caught. Despite one of the largest police investigations of its time, despite hundreds of suspects, despite numerous letters allegedly sent by the killer, including the infamous "From Hell" letter delivered with part of a human kidney, the identity of Jack the Ripper remains unknown. What makes this case endure over a century later? Partly it's the mystery, partly it's the cultural impact. This was one of the first serial killer cases covered extensively by newspapers, creating public panic on a massive scale. The name Jack the Ripper itself came from letters sent to media and police, though many historians believe these were hoaxes by journalists seeking to sell papers. Theories about the killer's identity range from plausible to absurd. Some believe he was a doctor or butcher, given the anatomical knowledge displayed. Others theorize he was a member of the upper class who came to Whitechapel to satisfy dark urges, protected by wealth and status. Some even proposed it was Prince Albert Victor, the grandson of Queen Victoria, though this theory has been thoroughly debunked. More recently, DNA analysis on a shawl allegedly from one crime scene pointed to a suspect named Aaron Kosminski, a Polish immigrant who was actually a suspect at the time, though this evidence remains controversial and disputed by many experts. The truth is, we'll likely never know who Jack the Ripper was. The passage of time, the limitations of Victorian forensic science, and the chaos of the original investigation mean the case will probably remain unsolved forever. But the impact is undeniable. These murders changed how society thought about criminal investigation, how media covered crime, and how the public understood the concept of a serial killer, even though that term wouldn't be invented for nearly another century. The victims deserve to be remembered not just as entries in a mystery, but as real people. Mary Ann Nichols was 43, trying to earn money for a bed in a lodging house the night she died. Annie Chapman was 47, chronically ill, struggling to survive. Elizabeth Stride was 44, a Swedish immigrant. Catherine Eddowes was 46, just released from police custody for being drunk hours before her murder. Mary Jane Kelly was 25, the youngest, killed in her own rented room in the most brutal murder of all. They were human beings failed by society, and their deaths were used to sell newspapers and create legends while their humanity was forgotten. Let's move forward in time to the 1970s and examine another case that involved not just murder, but psychological torture on a scale rarely seen. This is the story of Dennis Rader, the BTK killer. BTK stands for bind, torture, kill. That was how Dennis Rader signed his letters to police and media. Between 1974 and 1991, he murdered 10 people in and around Wichita, Kansas. What makes his case particularly disturbing is that he lived a completely normal-appearing life. He was married with 2 children. He was a compliance officer, enforcing city regulations. He was president of his church council. His neighbors described him as helpful, if a bit odd. Behind this facade was a man who derived pleasure from controlling, terrorizing, and killing. His first attack was on January 15, 1974. He broke into the Otero family home, cut the phone lines, and waited. When the family returned, he held them at gunpoint. Joseph Otero, his wife Julie, and 2 of their children, Josephine and Joseph Jr., were murdered. He strangled them one by one. The crime scene was staged, with Josephine's body arranged in a sexually provocative manner in the basement. The sheer cruelty shocked investigators. This wasn't robbery. This was something far darker. Rader continued killing sporadically over the years. Catherine Bright in April 1974, Shirley Vian in March 1977, Nancy Fox in December 1977. Each time he would break in, bind his victims, and kill them in his methodical way. But what made him different from many serial killers was his compulsion to communicate with police and media. In October 1974, he left a letter in a library book detailing his murders of the Otero family. In 1978, he sent a letter to a local TV station claiming responsibility and outlining his criminal activities. He loved the attention, the fear he created, the feeling of control over an entire city. He gave himself the BTK nickname. He wanted to be famous. Then, in 1991, after killing Dolores Davis, BTK went silent. Completely silent. Years passed. The investigation went cold. Families waited for closure. Some thought he might be dead, in prison for another crime, or had simply stopped. But in 2004, after 13 years of silence, BTK resurfaced. He began sending letters again, taunting police, asking if they'd forgotten about him. He sent packages containing items from his crimes, proving he was the real killer. He sent puzzles and communications. His need for attention had overcome his caution, and this would be his downfall. In one communication, Rader asked police if a floppy disk could be traced. They told him no. He trusted them. He sent a floppy disk containing a deleted document. Investigators recovered the metadata from that document. It contained the name Dennis and a reference to Christ Lutheran Church. A quick search revealed Dennis Rader, president of the church council. Police obtained a DNA sample from a PAP smear belonging to Rader's daughter from medical records. It was compared to DNA from crime scenes. It was a match. On February 25, 2005, Dennis Rader was arrested. The BTK killer, who had terrorized Wichita for decades, was a local government official, a family man, a church leader. At his trial, Rader pleaded guilty to 10 counts of first-degree murder. He was sentenced to 10 consecutive life sentences with no possibility of parole for 175 years. During his sentencing, he showed no remorse. Instead, he described his crimes in chilling detail, referring to his victims as projects and explaining his selection process with cold detachment. His lack of empathy was absolute. Today, Dennis Rader is incarcerated at El Dorado Correctional Facility in Kansas, where he will remain until his death. His case demonstrated how serial killers can hide in plain sight for decades, and how their own egos can ultimately lead to their capture. If he hadn't started communicating again, hadn't trusted police about the floppy disk, he might never have been caught. What's your take on killers who seek attention versus those who try to disappear? Does the psychology differ fundamentally? Let me know in the comments. Now let's discuss a case from Russia that took decades to solve and involved one of the most prolific serial killers in recorded history. This is the story of Andrei Chikatilo, known as the Butcher of Rostov. Between 1978 and 1990, Chikatilo murdered at least 52 people, mostly women and children in the Soviet Union. The true number may be higher. His methods were sadistic beyond description, involving torture, mutilation, and sexual assault. He targeted vulnerable people, runaways, homeless individuals, sex workers, children he could lure away from bus stops or train stations. He operated during a time when Soviet authorities were reluctant to admit they had a serial killer, believing such crimes were products of Western decadence, not something that could happen in the USSR. His first known victim was a 9-year-old girl named Lena Zakotnova, killed on December 22, 1978. Chikatilo lured her to an old house, attempted to assault her, and when she resisted, he stabbed her to death. He was actually questioned during the initial investigation, but another man, Alexander Kravchenko, was arrested, tried, and executed for the crime. This catastrophic miscarriage of justice allowed Chikatilo to continue killing for years. Throughout the 1980s, bodies began appearing near railway stations across the region. The victims were found in remote wooded areas, often mutilated so extensively that identification was difficult. Chikatilo would approach victims at stations, often pretending to be a helpful stranger offering food or assistance. Once they were isolated, he would attack. Soviet authorities struggled to coordinate the investigation across jurisdictions. Bureaucracy, secrecy, and reluctance to create public panic hampered efforts. But in 1984, a detective named Viktor Burakov was assigned to lead a task force. He understood they were dealing with a serial killer, even if officials were hesitant to use that term. Burakov began compiling patterns, tracking railway movements, staking out stations. In 1984, Chikatilo was actually detained at a bus station while acting suspiciously. Police found a rope and knife in his bag, but when his blood type was tested, it didn't match semen found at crime scenes. At the time, investigators didn't understand that Chikatilo was a rare non sequitur, someone whose blood type doesn't show up in other bodily fluids. This anomaly saved him and he was released. The murders continued throughout the late 1980s. Burakov's team conducted mass surveillance operations, stationing thousands of undercover officers at stations. In November 1990, an officer noticed a man emerging from woods near a station, his face scratched, his clothing disheveled. His name was Andrei Chikatilo. He was detained, questioned, and released. But investigators kept watching him. They obtained samples for analysis. The new field of DNA testing, just becoming available, was applied. It confirmed what blood typing had missed. Chikatilo was the killer. On November 20th, 1990, he was arrested. During interrogation, he confessed to 56 murders, providing details only the killer could know. His trial in 1992 was a spectacle. Chikatilo was kept in a cage in the courtroom, ranting, shouting, at times claiming insanity. The judge and prosecutors detailed crimes so horrific that even hardened court observers were sickened. He was found guilty of 52 murders and sentenced to death. On February 14, 1994, he was executed by a single gunshot behind the right ear in a soundproof room in Novocherkassk prison. The Chikatilo case revealed massive flaws in Soviet law enforcement, the danger of ideological denial that such crimes could occur, and the importance of modern forensic techniques. Viktor Burakov's determination was instrumental in finally stopping one of history's most prolific serial killers. We've covered several cases now, each horrifying in their own way, each revealing different aspects of what drives individuals to commit such acts. But let's discuss one more case, this one from South America, that shocked an entire continent. This is the story of Pedro Lopez, known as the Monster of the Andes. Pedro Lopez may be the most prolific serial killer in history. He confessed to murdering over 300 young girls across Colombia, Peru, and Ecuador during the 1970s. Think about that number. 300 lives, 300 families destroyed, and yet his name is far less known than Bundy or Dahmer. Perhaps because his victims were among the poorest and most vulnerable, indigenous girls and street children whose disappearances were not always investigated thoroughly. Lopez had a horrific childhood. Born in Colombia in 1948, he was the seventh of 13 children. His mother was a sex worker who allegedly threw him out at age 8 for sexually abusing his younger sister. He ended up living on the streets, where he was repeatedly victimized himself. By his late teens, he had developed into a predator. He began killing in Peru in 1969, targeting young girls from indigenous tribes. He would pose as a kind stranger, offer food or help, then lure them to remote areas. According to his confessions, he killed over 100 girls in Peru before an attempted kidnapping went wrong and he was beaten by locals and turned over to authorities. But instead of facing justice, he was deported to Colombia. There, he continued his crimes, this time with even more frequency. He would hunt in marketplaces, bus stations, crowded areas where poor children could disappear without much notice. Between Peru, Colombia, and Ecuador, he claims to have killed at least 300 girls, though some investigators believe the number could be higher. His capture came almost by accident in 1980 in Ecuador. A flash flood near Ambato revealed several buried bodies. Then Lopez was caught attempting to abduct a young girl from a marketplace. When police searched his area, they found more graves. Under interrogation, Lopez confessed and kept confessing. He led police to burial sites across 3 countries. He showed no remorse, explaining that he preferred killing girls from indigenous communities because they were less likely to be reported missing. His cold, calculated reasoning was chilling. Lopez was convicted of 110 murders in Ecuador, though he confessed to far more. He was sentenced to just 16 years, the maximum allowed under Ecuadorian law at the time. In 1994, additional 4 years were added for another murder. He was declared insane and transferred to a psychiatric hospital in 1998. Then, in 1999, he was released. One of the world's most prolific serial killers, back on the streets. There was international outcry, but by Ecuadorian law, he had served his time. He was immediately re-entered in Colombia on an outstanding warrant and placed in a psychiatric facility. In 2002, he was released again due to a legal technicality. An international warrant was issued for a fresh murder. And then Pedro Lopez vanished. To this day, his whereabouts are unknown. Some believe he's dead. Others fear he's still alive, possibly still killing. The thought that someone responsible for 300 murders could be walking free is almost incomprehensible. But it's a possibility that haunts investigators and families of victims to this day. The Lopez case highlights failures in international justice systems, the vulnerability of marginalized populations, and the horrifying reality that some monsters may never truly face justice for their crimes. These cases we've examined, from Bundy's calculated charm to Dahmer's isolated compulsions, from the Yorkshire Ripper's reign of terror to the unsolved mystery of Jack the Ripper, from BTK's need for attention to Chikatilo's bureaucratic camouflage, and finally to Lopez's exploitation of societal indifference, they all reveal different facets of what we call evil. What drives human beings to commit such acts? Psychologists, criminologists, and neuroscientists have studied this question for decades. Some killers show signs of psychopathy, the inability to feel empathy or remorse. Others experienced severe childhood trauma that fundamentally altered their development. Some have brain abnormalities visible on scans. Many have combinations of all these factors. But understanding doesn't mean excusing. These individuals made choices. They chose to harm, to kill, to destroy lives and families. What we can learn from these cases is how to better protect potential victims, how to improve investigative techniques, how to recognize warning signs earlier. Many of these killers showed troubling behavior long before they killed. Some were arrested for lesser crimes and released. Some were even questioned multiple times and let go. Better training, better coordination between law enforcement agencies, better use of forensic technology. These are the tools we've developed in response to cases like these. We've also learned the importance of taking all victims seriously. Too often in these cases, early victims were marginalized people whose disappearances weren't investigated urgently enough. Sex workers, homeless individuals, indigenous people, street children. They are human beings who deserve protection and justice. When societies fail to value all lives equally, predators exploit those gaps. The families of victims live with unimaginable pain. Parents who lost children, children who lost parents, siblings, friends, entire communities traumatized. These aren't just statistics in documentaries. They're real people who wake up every day with an absence that can never be filled. Remembering that humanity is essential, these cases aren't entertainment. They're tragedies that shaped criminal justice, changed laws, and left scars that span generations. Today, thankfully, many of these killers are either dead or imprisoned for life. Ted Bundy was executed. Jeffrey Dahmer was killed in prison. Peter Sutcliffe died behind bars. Dennis Rader will never be free. Andre Chikatilo was executed, but Pedro Lopez's fate remains unknown. A chilling reminder that justice isn't always certain. Modern technology gives us advantages earlier investigators lacked. DNA analysis, digital forensics, improved communication systems, psychological profiling. All these tools make it harder for serial killers to operate undetected for long periods. But we can never become complacent. Evil exists. It hides behind ordinary faces. It walks among us. Vigilance, strong investigative practices, and a justice system that values all victims equally. These are our best defenses. If this investigation into some of history's most evil serial killers has impacted you, make sure to subscribe to True Crime Vault for more in-depth documentaries. Hit that like button and share your thoughts in the comments below. What case shocked you most? Are there other killers you think we should examine? Let me know. And remember, these aren't just stories. These are real people, real victims, real families, and real monsters who walked among us. That's what makes them so terrifying. And that's why we must never forget.